and welcome back to another Game of Thrones episode of I See What You Did There. So, now that the season finale of Game of Thrones has come, the show has finally caught up to the majority of the book's plot lines, though a few are still in progress, like Arya's, for example. So, now we have to wait another 10 months before the new episodes come out, and who knows when in 2016 Martin plans to release Winds of Winter, assuming it doesn't get pushed again. In the meantime, although the books are pretty much caught up, there is a ton of material within the books that gives fans plenty to speculate about. One thing the books are notorious for is including a large variety of prophecies, some of which have come true, some of which haven't, and a large number of others that are still in limbo. One scene that book fans were a bit upset about being changed significantly in the show was Daenerys' visit to the House of the Undying in Season 2. In the books, Dany sees numerous visions within the house. Now, I can understand why a majority of it was cut. For practicality reasons, it would have gone on way too long, and the show can only use so much material in 10-hour-long episodes at a time. The visions also have a lot of spoilers for events in the future, so from a story perspective, it might not have had a lot of impact if these events were shown early, even if some of them aren't really obvious. Now, while I understand why they were cut, it is unfortunate because there's a lot of really cool things that Dany sees there which contain clues to significant events later on in the series. So, in honor of the season finale and the beginning of the long wait for Season 6, and Winds of Winter, I'm going to break down the visions that Dany sees in the House of the Undying, and what possible predictions we can make about the series in the future based on what prophecies have come true already and those that still haven't. Once again, this video contains spoilers for the current season of Game of Thrones, as well as up to A Dance of Dragons. Dany sees a large number of visions, but the visions she sees aren't randomly told to her. Martin orders them in a very specific way. I've broken the visions down into 4 different groups, based on the order in which Dany sees them and how they relate to the others within that group. Part 1. The Fate of Westeros. Vision 1. In one room, a beautiful woman sprawled naked on the floor, while 4 little men crawled over her. They had radish-pointed faces and tiny pink hands, like the servitor who had brought her the glass of shade. One was pumping between her thighs. Another savaged her breasts, worrying at the nipples with his wet red mouth, tearing and chewing. The most common interpretation for this vision is that the 4 rat-faced men are representing the 4 kings fighting for control of Westeros. At this point in the books, Renly is dead, so that leaves Joffrey, Robb, Stannis, and Balon Greyjoy. The woman being assaulted by them is then believed to be Westeros, and the assault is supposed to represent how the War of the 4 Kings is destroying the land. Other interpretations believe the woman to represent a specific character from the series, from Cersei to Marjorie, and even Sansa. I generally agree with the first interpretation of the men being the kings and the woman being Westeros. It is establishing the current state of the world, and this interpretation works in conjunction with the next few visions she sees. Vision 2. Farther on, she came upon a feast of corpses. Savagely slaughtered, the feasters lay strewn across overturned chairs and hacked trestled tables, a sprawl in pools of congealing blood. Some had lost limbs, even heads. Severed hands clutched bloody cups, wooden spoons, roast fowl, heels of bread. In a throne above them sat a dead man with the head of a wolf. He wore an iron crown and held a leg of lamb in one hand as a king might hold a scepter, and his eyes followed Dany with mute appeal. This vision is pretty much universally believed to be foreshadowing the events of the Red Wedding. Not much else is really needed to be explained for this one, other than this is one of the events that probably led to the decision to cut the majority of the visions from the show. Showing this could have tipped off viewers about the Red Wedding. Vision 3. I know this room, she thought. She remembered those great wooden beams and the carved animal faces that adorned them. And there outside the window, a lemon tree. The sight of it made her heart ache with longing. It is the house with the red door, the house in Braavos. No sooner had she thought it than old Sir Willem came into the room, leaning heavily on his stick. "Little princess, there you are," he said in his gruff, kind voice. "Come," he said, "come to me, my lady. You're home now. You're safe now." His big, wrinkled hand reached for her, soft as old leather, and Dany wanted to take it and hold it and kiss it. She wanted that as much as she had ever wanted anything. Her foot edged forward, and then she thought, "He's dead. He's dead. The sweet old bear, he died a long time ago." Sir Willem was the knight who helped Viserys and Dany escape from Dragonstone and helped raise them in Braavos for several years. Willem, along with Oberyn Martell, secretly arranged a marriage plot between Arianne Martell, Doran's daughter and heir to Dorne, to Viserys, with the promise of winning back the Iron Throne for Viserys as king. However, Willem ended up dying before he told any of this to Viserys or Dany. Dany's vision of him is a reminder of her happiest days, but is also a reminder of what could have been, a common theme throughout her journey in the House of the Undying. Vision 4. Beyond loomed a cavernous stone hall, the largest she had ever seen. The skulls of dead dragons looked down from its walls. Upon a towering, barbed throne sat an old man in rich robes, an old man with dark eyes and long silver-gray hair. "Let him be king over charred bones and cooked meat," he said to a man below him. "Let him be the king of ashes." Based on accounts from Jaime Lannister, this vision is believed to be that of King Aerys telling his hand to set fire to King's Landing so Robert Baratheon cannot take it from him. It matches what Jaime tells Brienne. He slew Aerys in order to prevent this from happening. Vision 5. The man had her brother's hair, but he was taller, and his eyes were a dark indigo rather than lilac. "Aegon," he said to a woman nursing a newborn babe in a great wooden bed. "What better name for a king?" "Will you make a song for him?" the woman asked. "He has a song," the man replied. "He is the prince that was promised, and his is the song of ice and fire." He looked up when he said it, and his eyes met Dany's, and it seemed as if he saw her standing there beyond the door. "There must be one more," he said, though whether he was speaking to her or the woman in the bed, she could not say. "The dragon has 3 heads." He went to the window seat, picked up a harp, and ran his fingers lightly over its silvery strings. From Dany's description and the discussions taking place, Dany is seeing a conversation between her brother Rhaegar and his wife Elia Martell. There are 2 important pieces to be taken from this particular vision: Rhaegar believing Aegon is the prince that was promised, and the phrase, "the dragon has 3 heads." The prince that was promised is a prophesied savior, the legend having been passed down for thousands of years. Melisandre believes Azor Ahai is the savior as well. Aemon tells Sam that Rhaegar believed his son to be that prince, but Aemon says the word for prince in Valyrian is actually gender neutral, and that it is Dany who is the princess who was promised. Another clue pointing to Dany as the savior is that Rhaegar looks up at Dany when he mentions the prince. The phrase, "the dragon has 3 heads," is often said along with the prince that was promised. The prince must have 2 others by his side to become the dragon. Rhaegar is telling this to Elia. Their daughter Rhaenys and son Aegon are 2, but there needs to be another dragon in order for the prophecy to come true. However, Elia Martell was frail and unable to deliver another child. Some readers speculate then that he kidnapped Lyanna Stark in order to have another child. The prince-princess that was promised has been the subject of debate for book readers. Some believe it to be Dany, some believe it to be Aegon Targaryen, assuming that young Griff is the real one and not a Blackfyre bastard, and others believe it to be Jon Snow. Dany is certainly a possibility based on what we know about her and Aemon mentioning it. Aegon was believed to be the prince in the original memory, so if young Griff is really Aegon, it could be him. And if Jon Snow's believed parentage is Rhaegar and Lyanna, he is the Song of Ice from his Stark side and Fire from his Targaryen side. This vision is arguably the most important one that Dany sees, as it ties back into the name of the series, A Song of Ice and Fire. The first group of visions all connect back to the state of Westeros. The first vision shows the current state of affairs, the Red Wedding shows a major future event, and the rest all deal with significant events of the past that led to where Dany is today. Rhaegar's belief in the prophecy leading to Robert's rebellion, Aerys attempting to burn the city and sealing his fate, and Willem helping smuggle Dany to Braavos and helping to raise her. Dany's family history is a large part of who she is, and it makes her question a lot of the choices she makes. Dany's biggest goal at this point is to sail to Westeros to claim the throne, and these visions are a part of a way to help her understand the land which she is trying to get back to. Part 2. Child of 3. After the first group of visions, Dany comes across the Undying, a group of immortal warlocks who glamour themselves to appear young and ageless, but are really withered corpses. They tell Dany she is the child of 3, and the phrase Rhaegar stated before is repeated: "The dragon has 3 heads." The Undying then give her another set of prophecies dealing with 3s. Prophecy 1. 3 fires. 3 fires must you light. 1 for life, and 1 for death, and 1 to love. Now, Dany has set a number of fires, some of which could end up meaning the same thing. For example, Drogo's funeral pyre could be any of the fires, or all of them. Death could be referring to Drogo or Mirri Maz. Life most likely refers to the dragons being born from the fire, and love could be a reference to Drogo. It is entirely possible that the funeral pyre only counts as a single fire, and there are other fires that end up being set later on. Most interpretations view the fires to be literal fires she sets, but it could take on a more metaphorical meaning as well. Possible future fires might be burning down the Dothraki with Drogon, or, more likely, a battle against the White Walkers where dragonfire is absolutely needed. Prophecy 2. 3 mounts. 3 mounts must you ride. 1 to bed, and 1 to dread, and 1 to love. Now, there are generally 2 ways to interpret the mounts. It could be the mounts as a form of transportation. This could be Silver, the horse Khal Drogo gave to her as a wedding gift, who carried her off to her wedding bed, and Drogon. She literally flew on him to the Dothraki's territory. If all the mounts are physical, it's hard to say what the third one will be. Another interpretation is that the mounts are her lovers or bedmates. One is Drogo, another could be Hizdahr, since she did intend to marry him. Daario is another possibility, though we aren't exactly sure what Daario's story is, so it's difficult to gauge his loyalty to Dany. Most likely, I think it's a combination of physical transportation and lovers. To bed could be Daario, to dread would most likely be Drogon, and love could either be Drogo or a possible future lover. Prophecy 3. 3 treasons. 3 treasons will you know. Once for blood, and once for gold, and once for love. Dany is told she will know 3 treasons, though whether they are treasons done to her or treasons she commits is open to interpretation. We know Jorah Mormont betrayed her for gold, so most likely he is that particular treason. Mirri Maz's blood magic could have been interpreted as treason by Dany since it took her child and her husband. The others are either something that hasn't happened yet or hasn't been fully explained. One prevailing theory is that Hizdahr is the Harpy, the leader of the Sons of the Harpy, and he planned to kill Dany after marrying her in order to take control of the city. This could have been a possible treason, but since Dany escaped on Drogon before that was confirmed, it's unknown if this counts. The number 3 has a large connection with Daenerys. The sigil of her house is a 3-headed dragon, and it is heavily foreshadowed that even if Dany isn't necessarily the prince that was promised, she is most certainly one of the 3 heads of the dragon. These prophecies are told in a series of 3 in order to really hammer in the concept of the dragon has 3 heads. I'll be doing a separate video for the dragon has 3 heads prophecy along with the prince that was promised theory, since that focuses on other characters besides Dany, and there is enough to discuss there to make an entire video. After hearing these prophecies, Dany doesn't understand what they mean, so the Undying begin to show her a new set of visions leading to the 3rd group. Part 3. Daenerys' titles. The next group of visions works with the pattern of 3 again, but in a slightly different manner. After a set of 3 visions, the Undying call Dany the Mother of Dragons and another title. The second title that follows these 3 visions then circles back to what was just seen. Pattern 1. Daughter of Death. Vision 1. Viserys screamed as the molten gold ran down his cheeks and filled his mouth. This one is a straight memory of Dany, so not much is needed to be discussed here. Vision 2. A tall lord with copper skin and silver gold hair stood beneath the banner of a fiery stallion, a burning city behind him. The common interpretation for this vision is that based on his physical description and the banner, this is the future Rhaego would have had, possibly as the stallion that mounts the world, if he hadn't died. Vision 3. Rubies flew like drops of blood from the chest of a dying prince, and he sank to his knees in the water and with his last breath murmured a woman's name. Dany is seeing the death of Rhaegar by Robert Baratheon on the Trident, which has been described by numerous characters in the books, the rubies being the clue here since they were adorned on his red armor. The woman's name he utters is either his wife Elia, or, in keeping with the R+L=J theory, Lyanna. After these 3 visions, the Undying call Dany the Daughter of Death. These are all examples of how Dany has grown up with or experienced death. It has followed her family. Rhaegar's death represents the death of her dynasty in Westeros. Viserys represented her no longer living by his rule, and Rhaego's death is what sets her on the path to eventually lighting the funeral pyre, which brought the dragons back. Pattern 2. Slayer of Lies. Vision 1. Glowing like sunset, a red sword was raised in the hand of a blue-eyed king who cast no shadow. This is commonly believed to be Stannis Baratheon, whom Melisandre at first believes to be Azor Ahai, or the prince that was promised. Stannis was described to have blue eyes, has set his sword on fire at one point in the series, and the lack of the shadow could be a callback to when Melisandre used shadow magic to kill Renly. Vision 2. A cloth dragon swayed on poles amidst a cheering crowd. One interpretation is that the cloth dragon is representing the Targaryen banner, and that it could be a sign that Dany is indeed welcomed amongst a cheering crowd, either Essos or Westeros. Another prevailing theory is that this is a warning to the readers that young Griff, who is supposedly the young Prince Aegon who was switched with another baby and spirited out of King's Landing, isn't actually Aegon, but a Blackfyre instead. They are bastards born from Targaryens, which explains his appearance. The reason a lot of readers believe him to be a fake Aegon is from this vision in conjunction with another. Dany later on is told to be wary of the Mummer's dragon, which she connects back to the vision of the cloth dragon. A Mummer is a performer, and cloth dragons are used as props. The readers learn at the end of Dance of Dragons that Varys is the one helping to get Aegon back on the throne, and he is very good at disguising himself and lying. Therefore, he is the Mummer, or the cloth, and Griff is the dragon. The name that Dany is called after this helps to support this theory as well. That and the fact that Griff was cut out of the show entirely, that's usually a sign that it's an extraneous plot thread. Vision 3. From a smoking tower, a great stone beast took wing, breathing shadow fire. This one is definitely one of the hardest to pin down, since it is very vaguely written. A beast? Does that mean a dragon or something else? This one has a number of different interpretations on who it could represent. Jon Connington, Griff's caretaker, has grayscale and his sigil is a griffin. The Harpy, represented by the Harpy statues in the city and willing to do whatever it takes to take down Dany, or even Euron Greyjoy, Balon Greyjoy's brother who wants to use the dragon horn to take control of the dragons and is sending his brother Victarion to Dany in order to retrieve it. All three of these have some interesting callbacks to the passage, but again, most of this is still speculation. The next name Dany is given is Slayer of Lies. Although the third one is a bit more up for debate, the general idea with this set is that they are all false in some way. Stannis isn't really Azor Ahai, young Griff isn't really a true Targaryen, at least if you connect it back to the term Slayer of Lies, and the beast's Shadowfire is indicative of spells or enchantments. By specifically using the term Slayer of Lies after these specific visions, it makes me more likely to believe that Stannis is an Azor Ahai, and young Griff is only being passed off as Aegon, not actually the real one. Pattern 3. Bride of Fire. Vision 1. Her Silver was trotting through the grass, to a darkling stream beneath a sea of stars. Silver was the name of the horse Khal Drogo gave to her on their wedding. Not much more to add to this one. Vision 2. A corpse stood at the prow of a ship, eyes bright in his dead face, grey lips smiling sadly. This is another very vaguely written one that could refer to a number of people. Aemon Targaryen, since he passes away on the ship leading to Old Town. Jon Connington, since he is traveling by ship and has grayscale, Tyrion also makes a comment to him about the prow of his ship, or it could be referring to a Greyjoy by making the reference to grey lips smiling. Vision 3. A blue flower grew from a chink in a wall of ice, and filled the air with sweetness. Lyanna Stark was often associated with blue flowers, whether it was the crown of winter roses that Rhaegar presented to her, or the memory of blue flowers Ned has whenever he thinks of Lyanna. This vision is one of the possible clues for the R+L=J theory, since having the flower in a wall of ice brings to mind the wall, and the flower could be referring to Lyanna or her child, Jon. After this final set of 3, Dany is then called the Bride of Fire. Although the Daughter of Death and Slayer of Lies names make sense in conjunction with the visions before them, this one is still a bit in the air. A number of these visions could refer to a multitude of people, which makes it harder to discern the meaning. Bride of Fire could be interpreted in several ways. Her marriages have some connections to fire, the horse representing Drogo, for example, though the others don't work unless Dany has a lot of new husbands in the future. Or, more commonly, it just means there is a connection in general with her and fire. The horse's connection to Drogo works whichever connection you go with. If the corpse on the ship refers to Jon Connington, young Griff's guardian, that might suggest a possible union with Dany and Aegon, which was Griff's initial plan. After that set of visions, Dany gets one final group of visions that come on one right after the other, faster and faster. Part 4. The Final Countdown. Vision 1. Shadows whirled and danced inside a tent, boneless and terrible. This is shadow or blood magic Mirri Maz used on Drogo. 2. A little girl ran barefoot toward a big house with a red door. A repeat of the earlier scene with her at Braavos, used to show her love and nostalgia for it. 3. Mirri Maz shrieked in the flames, a dragon bursting from her brow. This is most likely representing how Mirri's sacrifice was partially helpful to birthing the dragons. 4. Behind a silver horse, the bloody corpse of a naked man bounced and dragged. This is Dany's memory of the poisoner being dragged after attempting to kill her with the wine. 5. A white lion ran through grass taller than a man. This could either be a memory of the white lion whose pelt Drogo gave Dany, or it could be a reference to a Lannister, whose sigil is a lion, most likely referring to Tyrion since he is on his way to her. 6. Beneath the Mother of Mountains, a line of naked crones crept from a great lake and knelt shivering before her, their grey heads bowed. One interpretation of this is usually the Dosh Khaleen as she performed the stallion heart-eating ceremony, as they bowed before her. 7. 10,000 slaves lifted blood-stained hands as she raced by on her silver, riding like the wind. "Mother," they cried, "Mother! Mother!" They were reaching for her, touching her, tugging at her cloak, the hem of her skirt, her foot, her leg, her breast. They wanted her, needed her, the fire, the life, and Dany gasped and opened her arms to give herself to them. This final vision shows Dany being greeted after freeing the slaves and them calling her mother. Although there are a few visions in this group that could be interpreted in a different way, I think that they are all memories of major events that Dany has experienced. The blood magic ritual, her childhood in Braavos, the funeral pyre, the poisoner, Drogo giving her a gift, the heart-eating ceremony. These all lead to the final vision given, one to show her future that will come to pass in the books. Most of them deal with family or her trying to be a mother. The loss of her son and husband, the fonder memories of her family in Braavos, all of which lead to the moment where the people of Yunkai accept Dany not just as a ruler, but their mother and caretaker. A trait that drives Dany is her need to protect her people and children. These visions show how she becomes this mother figure to the freed slaves. Conclusion. Martin writes each of these visions and prophecy sections with specific goals in mind for them as a group. First, we see the state of the world before Dany is actually a ruler. Then she is shown a specific number of visions warning her and attempting to teach her. The third gives her specific traits for her and more specific warnings to keep an eye out for. And finally, it concludes with what is most likely the true goal for Dany, to take on the mother role that was taken from her. Although the purpose of the Undying was to use the visions to trick and trap Dany, there are still a number of things that Dany could still learn a lesson from. The prophecies concerning the prince that was promised in The Dragon Has Three Heads is referenced a number of times, and there were a number of warnings about being betrayed, as well as being on the lookout for those who are false. Although a good number of these are memories, or have already come to pass, there are still a large number of these prophecies that are left open to several interpretations. That's one of the things I love about this series, just how much time and energy gets devoted to breaking down the clues and figuring out how the pieces all fit to the puzzle before the characters do. Now, as I have stated throughout, a lot of these visions are open to several interpretations, but by figuring out how the visions work as a set, rather than individually, that is what led to certain choices for me, such as the idea that the cloth dragon is a warning for Dany, and subsequently the readers, that young Griff is the Mummer's dragon, rather than actually Aegon Targaryen. I'm curious to know, which interpretations do you agree with me on, and which don't you? Are there other interpretations for a particular vision or prophecy that I haven't mentioned that you feel is worth discussing? Post in the comments below and I'll be taking a look at these as I continue to work on more Game of Thrones videos. Don't worry, Stark fans, I will be proceeding with the rest of the Stark children in future videos soon, so you have that to look forward to. Thanks for joining me on I See What You Did There. I'm Kaluna, and I'll see you guys next time.